I'm Kyle from Soul Chocolate, and today we are turning this into this. Now you might also just call that melting chocolate, but that's not as dramatic, so I chose another route. Today we're trying the double boiler method. It's pretty simple, and most likely you have all of the tools at home. So what you do need is something to heat your chocolate. In my case, I have an induction burner. It could be gas, it could be electric, just something to warm up water in your pot. Speaking of pots, a small pot or saucepan, whatever you may have, that can hold a small amount of water. We don't need a lot, but we do need a bit of a gap in your pot to separate our next part, the bowl, from the water itself. And speaking of water, I'm just gonna top a little bit in. And we don't need a lot of water in our pot, really just enough to create steam that's going to come in contact with the bowl above. Of course, if you have too little and your pot's left on too long, you're gonna be dealing with your pot drying and maybe burning the bottom of your pot, so just enough in there. So next, throw my bowl on the top. Apart from this, there's a few other items we may need. If you are chopping a block of chocolate, which I am myself, likely you will need your knife, something to scrape your chocolate into your bowl itself. Miscellaneous, nice little spatula is quite helpful just for moving your chocolate around in your bowl as it starts to melt, and then to get it out of your bowl as well. And bonus points for a digital thermometer. This just gives you an idea of where you are in terms of temperature, and so you don't overdo it. Overdo it means that you burn your chocolate. So there's always risks with warming your chocolate. And I guess the cons of the double boiler method, although they're pretty low, they are there. The number one is you can overheat your chocolate quickly. So if you have your induction burner or your heat source on too high, it's going to create a ton of steam and a ton of heat. And that's gonna sit on the bottom of your chocolate and it can burn it. Especially if there are milk solids in your chocolate, you have a higher chance of burning it. The second is water and chocolate do not mix. So if you have water from your bowl, it gets into your chocolate, it's known as seizing. Seizing essentially is where it starts to push the fat out of solution within your chocolate and it becomes a lumpy mess. It's really hard to recover as well, so it's best you just avoid it as best you can. The last thing I want to mention is as we get going here, you do want to stir your chocolate in a regular frequency or intervals just to prevent that burning from happening. But otherwise, it's pretty foolproof. So let's get going here. First step, I'm going to get my chocolate chopped while my water comes to a simmer. I'm going to turn this on pretty low, probably like a 3 out of 10 in terms of heat source. All I want to do is get steam. If it's a rolling boil, drop it down. And if there is no steam, bring it up. So let's chop our chocolate. And if we're talking about melting and chocolate, if you have smaller pieces, it's going to melt, I guess, a little more evenly. If you have big lumps in there, likely what has melted will get hotter and the lumps will be cooler. So if you want to try and just get your chocolate melted, work on getting it as small as you can. I'm just going to be a little rough here. The other differentiating factor, I guess, like between chocolates and how they melt is the makeup. So if you have a dark chocolate that has a lot of fat in it, it will likely melt faster than something that has less, maybe like a semi-sweet chocolate or a milk chocolate even. It really depends on the manufacturer that you're buying from and the ingredients that they do add into the chocolate itself. All right, so chocolate is chopped, my water is warming. I'm just gonna slide this into my bowl, taking care to see if I can get all pieces in and nothing on my burner. You can always move your bowl to the side if you want, if you're worried about it getting on your flame or whatever heat source you have. So this part does take a little bit of time. If you did want to speed it up, start with hot water in your pot. it's just going to start steaming a little bit faster. Normally what I do is I'll just pull it off, have a little peek inside, no steam yet. And this is also a way that I can kind of monitor the intensity of the boil or the steam that is being produced here. So every once in a while, let's have a little peek. But once I get going and I understand the type of heat I'm dealing with, there's no bother. But I have noticed if you see steam just like bubbling out the side like crazy, turn it down. It's gonna be so hot, likely you're gonna burn yourself and likely you're gonna burn the chocolate. If you are dealing with a stainless bowl like this, you might wanna have like a cloth or something on the side just to pick it up, especially at the ends. But the cooler of temperatures you deal with, the less likely it's going to hurt you, but better to be safe than sorry. Okay, so I see on the side of my bowl, there's a bit of melting happening. That is a clear sign that there is heat coming in contact with my bowl. I'm going in the right direction. It's still going to take a little bit of time, but it's always best just to rotate your chocolate, because now we want to put the solid stuff on the bottom of our bowl, which will allow that to melt. And then over time, it starts to liquefy more and more. And it's almost like this snowball effect. So we get to the point where everything is almost melted. And at that point, we can shut the heat off and kind of let it coast right till the end. So it's kind of getting there. It does look more like a wet sand or something to begin with. But as you get going, it'll really start to smooth out. So the signs of burnt chocolate. If you've overheated it, what you will notice is a very lumpy consistency. It doesn't seem silky smooth like the bowl that we have here. Like this is what we're looking for. What you will get with burnt chocolate is almost like a crumble. Everything just kind of seizes together. It doesn't want to release and be as fluid as the chocolate that we need. That also is kind of the case for when water gets into your chocolate. It can also happen, as I mentioned prior, if we have a very high heat source and a bunch of steam wafting out the sides, there can be chances of water getting into our bowl. But also if I'm to pull this bowl off and it's just coated in steam, I bring it to a surface, something else gets on top. So you can also have just a nice cloth on the side, something that you can wipe the bottom of the bowl if you're worried about. But usually if you're careful, you don't have to worry too much about that. So again, give it a little stir. You can kind of see a bit more melting's happening here, but I'm gonna give it a few more minutes, check back on it, give it a stir, and go from there. So I noticed there is a little bit of steam billowing out the sides here. I'm just gonna drop mine down a little bit just to maintain that real light simmer here. I don't want my hands to burn. I don't want my chocolate to burn. I want this to go right so I can enjoy it later. We are getting close to the end here, and I can tell pretty easily if we look at our chocolate, yes, there are lumps in here, but most is now liquid. I can kind of coast off of the remaining heat once I shut this down, which will allow the rest to fully melt. So I did reference a thermometer as a bonus tool. And the reason why I like it is one, you can tell pretty quickly if your chocolate is becoming too hot. And that can be used as, I guess, like a point to either increase or decrease the temperature at hand. So usually if chocolate is bridging above 115 Fahrenheit, you can even go a little bit higher, 120 maybe at most. But if it keeps going higher, what's going to happen is you risk burning your chocolate. So you can take a reading of your chocolate and just get an idea where you're sitting. A lot of times I don't even bring mine past 100, especially if I'm moving into a tempering step next, which I can discuss in a later video as well. But if you want it warm, maybe you're also adding in like a scalded cream or something to make a ganache. I really don't think that temperature difference will matter to you as much, but you have that threshold. So you just want to be very mindful of not going to town and rocketing the temperature to like 130, 140, because chances are you're going to mess something up, you're going to get frustrated, and then maybe the partner you're making your chocolate mousse for or something is not really going to like what you make. All right, our chocolate has fully melted. we are ready to go. So depending on what you're using this for, there might be a few other steps involved. If you want to dip, say, strawberries or marshmallows like this little guy, you can go ahead and do so. Sometimes you might want to let it cool a little bit just so it's not so hot. But keep in mind, if you have warmed your chocolate very high and you dip this, what's going to happen as it starts to solidify, it might be out of temper. Out of temper chocolate, what will happen is streaks will form over time. So what you can do is just store them in the fridge and then pull them out as you need them and enjoy them. So I'm gonna dip this little boy and enjoy myself. So this is melting chocolate by Double Boiler. If you need tips on tempering chocolate, if you need tips on melting chocolate another way, stay tuned, the videos are coming. But in the meantime, enjoy your chocolate, guys.